So who wins? I mean, this is probably the hardest analysis I've ever had to do. Luke would need to really worry about Anakin fighting longer and longer, assuming, there's no lava pits or anything like that, there's no high ground. The longer it took Luke to subdue Anakin, the harder and harder it would become for him to win. And not to mention Anakin's overall lightsaber speed. I think Luke would need to immobilize Anakin sooner in the fight if he wanted to win, just by sheer precision and calmness. But the more Anakin fought, the more his abilities would increase, along with his rage, and the battle would just become more and more difficult for Luke. This would be the only time that Anakin could actually win. Now, that doesn't mean I'm giving this fight to Anakin. I should also mention that I think Anakin's mentality of being the chosen one, the poster boy of the Clone Wars, and knowing he needed to win in order to save Padme's life, would propel his powers tenfold as the fight went on. He truly believed he was the best, but this also led to his downfall. It makes you think you're invincible, and as we all know, nobody is. I think if we had Anakin at the start of Revenge of the Sith against Luke, Luke would win, but Anakin in the dark side after slaying the entire Jedi Order, orange yellow Sith eyes, and his need to save Padme resting on his shoulders, would give Anakin quite the edge. But with all that anger would make him unsettled, and the more powerful he became, the more unbalanced he became, which is what led to his downfall. Luke would stay calm, cool, and collected the entire battle, and probably just defend himself until Anakin made a mistake. Not to mention, Luke fought Vader, who was more powerful in Return of the Jedi than Anakin was, albeit of course not being able to move as quickly. He was physically and force-wise more powerful, and Luke still got the upper hand. Now, there is something I want to mention about that. Vader wasn't really trying to kill Luke. He never actually was. So Luke fighting Vader isn't really ever a proper fair battle that we saw in the films, because Vader wasn't going all out. He was trying to turn Luke to the dark side. He was just playing with him a little bit and defending Luke's attacks, until at the very end when he got blindsided by Luke, and at that point Luke took the upper hand, tapped into the dark side, and got the best of Vader. Now, if Luke were to use some bits of the dark side as well, then it would be much more difficult for Anakin. So with all of this put together, Anakin being a better fighter, Luke being much more level-headed, and being extremely strong in the Force at this time, I think it would essentially just make him a stronger version of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And for that reason, the final verdict is Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian Season 2.
What?
And as hard as it is for me to say this, I think Luke in Mando Season 2 is basically a Jedi Master. I mean, Anakin is still an irrational, impatient fighter. He's much more gifted, he's more powerful potential-wise, but he's just not there yet. He hasn't had enough time to develop those powers. He's not as level-headed, and Luke is just so much more calm. And that really plays a huge role in a fight. Luke is like that sniper, whereas Anakin is like the shotgun. He's just volatile, he's insane, he's all over the place, he's just bleeding energy out of everywhere. Whereas Luke is focused. He knows what he's doing, he knows where to strike, and he knows when to strike. He knows when to be defensive, he knows when to be offensive. He has the power of the Force to guide him, and he has the abilities to take him through this battle. The only thing that led to Anakin's downfall against Obi-Wan wasn't his inabilities. He was much more capable than Obi-Wan and much more powerful, but it was his overall arrogance in his abilities, thinking that he is invincible, in that Obi-Wan underestimated his powers. And it was actually kind of interesting because Anakin tried to beat Obi-Wan the same way that Obi-Wan beat Maul. And this was going to be sort of a spit in the face to Obi-Wan, like, hey, I'm going to beat you at your own move. That's how good I am. And if you never caught that, well, now you know. Luke is really the most powerful being in the galaxy at this point. Now, Anakin is my favorite character in all of Star Wars. And I know you've heard me say I love Qui-Gon, I love Luke. Well, let me explain. Qui-Gon is my favorite for his personality. Luke for his overall story arc and his optimism. But Anakin, as a whole, is my favorite character. I think Luke would use his level-headedness to do what Kenobi did, but he's just, a much more powerful version of Kenobi, so it just doesn't really make sense for me to say that Anakin would beat him. Anakin would full-on just make a mistake out of his own arrogance. Not because he was weaker or anything like that, but he would just make a mistake, he'd fumble. He'd just become too cocky and arrogant, and Luke would take the finishing strike.